Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Amy. I'm from the InterSystems Australia office. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce Andreas Dieckow, who will be speaking about adopting InterSystems IRIS.
I'm pretty confident adopting InterSystems IRIS is easier than doing this presentation. Slides up, so I apologize for all of this. All right, so agenda, I quickly want to go some general guidance over this entire project, give you some overview of the changes between the two product lines. So when I say Caché Ensemble, I always mean the other product line, and the InterSystems IRIS is the target product line. So what has changed between these platforms? These are sometimes minor changes, sometimes more far-reaching changes that might affect your application code that you've used, and talk about coexistence and compatibility between the two product lines. This is kind of new, something we only really added in the last few months, starting to talk to customers about their plans or their abilities to adopt InterSystems IRIS. Give you some migration guidance, and then we can do also some Q&A at the end. It's kind of silly to pick this slide. So before really talking about all of this is the audience is, of course, Caché Ensemble customers, people that start out building a new application on top of InterSystems IRIS, don't have to pay attention to any of this here because that doesn't affect them. They start out fresh. This is really just for Caché Ensemble customers that want to take their existing application and move it forward into the platform that gets all our strategic attention at InterSystems. There are multiple ways of going about this. One is what I mentioned earlier, migrate or transition from one platform to the other. So you leave the InterSystems Caché or Ensemble instance behind and you move everything forward. That's in itself an interesting challenge. Then the other one is for situations where customers say, well, I have thousands of instances today. I really would like to take advantage of the InterSystems IRIS functionality. How can I do this without having to step right now into this transition of moving there? So we're going to support coexistence, where you can still use your existing Caché Ensemble instances, but connect already to the InterSystems environment and run them coexistent in both, so you can connect with technology across them. The other one is related to the migration aspect in itself, but it's interesting more for the actually process of cutting over. So I have prepared my new application to run on InterSystems IRIS, but of course there's an existing application running somewhere which has lots of data, potentially terabytes of data, and how do I now make that move coming from here to there with minimal downtime, with the possibility to get really an automatic process in place to move forward to this. So the goal here for us is to provide guidance documentation on how to do this, provide you with scripts and details to make this kind of actually real transition. You now putting this instance down, putting that next instance up, and how this works. So this is a summary over a document that we're working on. It's the InterSystems IRIS Adoption Guide. InterSystems internals already have seen this and are reviewing this right now. The goal is post-Global Summit to make the IRIS Adoption Guide available to all of you, of course, so that you can read this. So you get a lot of information in here. There will be more information in the InterSystems IRIS Adoption Guide, so I'm just giving some highlights in this presentation going through this. So not all the questions will be answered in this session. All the questions will hopefully be answered when this document is going out. So who has been to the LibIT session from Dagmar this morning at lunchtime and listened to, so she just talked there a little bit about their own experience, and for them it was really easy. LibIT is a company that really tries to stay on the recent versions from InterSystems and recent development. And for the most part, it was just for them, just transferring the code, making a few changes, and they were up and running in a very quick time. mileage will vary here. So if you have a recent application, your data is already on the Unicode database, that's the most straightforward path for probably most of all the customers that in group. Then the other part is you have a more older application, or you're using things that are not recent, or you are very well embedded into the richness of the functionality of the system. You might have to change more. An 8-bit database cannot be mounted on InterSystems IRIS. InterSystems IRIS is Unicode only, so there has to be a transition going forward. In larger environments is specifically if you run into data conversion needs, which you have if your 8-bit range is not ISO-Latin 1, because that now maps into a different space in the Unicode representation. So you have data conversions and potentially also application conversions if you have these kind of codes in your text as part of your application. So data conversions are, of course, the most complex one. And here we're trying to figure out what can we do to make this easier. One of the first things we looked at is if you want to do something, you want to have two systems run next to each other, we already have such a concept with mirroring, right? So they have two instances running, they're synchronized between each other. So we put some feature into the product that allows for mixed mirror configurations. So you can have one instance be a Caché instance or Ensemble instance, the other instance can be an InterSystems IRIS instance. This is not meant to be for deployed situation. This is only meant to use during a transition period. So we will not support this long term. But if you're going through a transition period where you have data conversions going on, we will support this and we'll see how we can help you with this. This is the most unknown element for us still on how we're going to do about this. So we're working on this right now. We do some more tests on this. What would it take to make this all happen? So I don't have all the answers for yet, but we have pretty good ideas on how to make this happen. And even if you don't want to use mirroring, maybe you step into the mirroring world for this transition period, have that entire system then running. The application still uses the data as the data gets into another instance where the data conversion happens. And once this is complete, then you switch over to the other instance and you have only minimal downtime and not weeks because you need it to convert data. So changes that needs to be considered. I highlighted a few, but there are others. One of the first one you need to look at is the supported platforms list the same as what you're deploying on. So if you have a Solaris instance on a Solaris machine and you want to use the InterSystems IRIS, that will not work on Solaris, so you have to find a different platform because InterSystems IRIS does not support Solaris. There's a bunch of other instances that are, or platforms that we're not supporting. We really focused InterSystems IRIS in a lot of areas down to what is actually really going forward of strategic relevance, right? So there's no 32-bit system, right? Everything is 64-bit. There are several operating systems that no longer appear here in this list. Similar with browsers and similar with other technology. One of the first things that we did when we said, okay, we're building now InterSystems IRIS, what does it mean? We want to take forward a bunch of technology that we all like, which is Caché and Ensemble. If you listen to Joe Gallant's session prior to this, he has extended that in a lot of ways and really described that really well. But there is also a lot of technology that we don't want to move forward. Things that are only used by maybe a few use cases, things that hold us back because we're having the technology in the product and we constantly have to pay attention to this, but that also limits possibilities. For example, one of the biggest challenges for us was always supporting OpenVMS. Just the existence of it and potentially having to support it has limited some of the capabilities of what we could do and put in the product. So not everything is available in InterSystems IRIS that is available in Caché and Ensemble. For the most part, we think customers are probably not going to be affected of this or seeing this. We have been very, very enthusiastic about it. We had a really very long drop list of what we want to drop, and then over time we shrunk it because it's not really possible to cut all of these out. But we wish we could have cut out more. it's like a metal ball on your leg, right? You have to carry this forward all these years. Eventually, you need to get rid of it, otherwise you cannot accelerate. And we all need to accelerate. You heard Terry say this, and it's really, really critical that we all focus on this kind of element. So simple things that is pretty much what everybody expects. The change in port numbers, right? So the IRIS has different port numbers other than Caché and Ensemble. I see some people take pictures. This slide, all these slides are in the conference app. So if you look at the app, all the slides are right in there, and we'll make this available. InterSystems IRIS, as already said, only supports Unicode. We remove documentation and samples from the product. That's something that we were planning for quite some time. That will happen for Caché and Ensemble as well. The main reasons for samples to go out is that the reaction time is not fast enough in updating samples, and they're sometimes getting outdated. Customers are looking sometimes at old samples. Samples are also used most of the time to showcase something, so they're not really built for application or deployment strengths. So samples in itself is often a security vulnerability in your environments because they're not meant to be. So if you have deployments today and you have samples installed, please uninstall the samples database. It's a concern, right? Get rid of it. Documentation, similar. We wanted to be more and faster reactive to this and being able to change it, which is why documentation is available now online for the most part. There's very small documentation that still ships with the product. But the online documentation is what you should look for, and this is what we're going to update. And there we can make changes to documentation later that reflects installed products. In the past, the only way of getting this documentation was getting a new installation. Then some just general things that have changed. So in general, if you just want to think about this, everywhere there is something that looks like it says Caché or the C, there's a C that means Caché. We got rid of it and replaced this with IRIS. So C control is now IRIS. So if you used to do C control session instance name, it's now IRIS session instance name. So that's not, the syntax in itself is still the same. But if you have scripts, you need to make changes, right? So if you have used these kind of controls in your scripts, you need to be aware of those, and they have changed. And this is what we have done here. The Caché database format has not changed. So if you have a caché.dat, which is already Unicode, you can just rename this to iris.dat and mount that database on an InterSystems IRIS instance. So you don't have to copy data, you don't have to move data. The worst thing that can happen is that you sit in a situation where you have to duplicate the space on your disk, right? So we don't want this to happen and avoid it, but with 8-bit to Unicode, that's probably not going to happen very easily. CPF file has changed, of course, and console log we changed also way, but we called that one message log. We tried to make this a little bit more future-proof so we don't have to change it in the future again. So name changes, Caché lib, Caché sys, Caché audit, they all now called IRIS lib. Most of the time that's not going to be of any problems. Just if you look at the system, they now look different on InterSystems IRIS. The resources, the internal resource names have changed as well. That might have some effect on your environment or your settings that you have. When you define a user, what kind of write access he has. If you transport this, which is possible, right, you can take the user records from a Caché instance and move it to an InterSystems IRIS access so you don't have to recreate all of this. You can do this because we only store hashed values, so that still works as long as you make sure that you transfer the seed values with the hash passwords across the network. Other things that have changed in the OpScript area is in general also references, so ISC is now becoming IRIS. We're also taking advantage of grouping things now better, which we couldn't do because of compatibility that we would have, or problems that we would have created in Caché and Ensemble. So for example, if you look at the last three, right now they're now grouped under up arrow IRIS, and these are just internal names that have changed. Caché temp is now IRIS temp, as you just have to map it to that one instead of the other one. Other name changes think this is where I am. For object script or for classes, the types, so Caché string becomes raw string. In general, the same philosophy here, where we're making changes over to other environments. Export format is something we changed to be to be compatible, but also to be precise of where it is. So if you do an export now, the generator is now called IRIS and not Caché. The version is now having 26. You can still use that format. The format in itself and contents hasn't changed. So if you change this, the values here for the generator to Caché and for the version to 25, you can actually import this in a Caché instance, right? So you just change the header files and it can be read there, and vice versa, right? So if you want to do this, just change these two XML values and you're ready to go. In the Java and JDBC area, we have also done renames of it. There's also something new, the InterSystems utils jar file, and the Caché DB does no longer exist and get namespace, got changed. I think these are also very straightforward. Functionality in those are compatible. .NET, similar changes. Again, we're taking advantage here of grouping effects. Sorry for this jumping. My finger is sometimes on the wrong button. And put them all under InterSystems together so that we have a better grouping of things together. Application development. So C gateways becomes now the ODBC gateway. Caché ODBC, IRIS ODBC, also library change name. Hibernate has a new dialect, InterSystems IRIS dialect. And so this is all straightforward, and I don't think too much of a concern. We have product name changes in InterSystems IRIS. So what is called Deep C in Caché and Ensemble is now called InterSystems IRIS Business Intelligence. I know InterSystems IRIS Natural Language Processing. Most of the time, this is going to be abbreviated with NLP. So sometimes when you get license keys, it will just refer to this as NLP. And I find is now InterSystems IRIS Search. But these are just name changes for the most part. So talking about things that are not going to go forward anymore or are deprecated. So we already removed some of the language capabilities, like language binding and Zen Mojo. They're no longer available. And then going forward, we have a dual strategy there for removing things. One was we removed the feature from the product, like Zen Mojo, so it's completely gone. Sometimes we removed documentation but left the feature around. And so, for example, Caché Object Script has many features. Some of these features are features that probably today nobody considers state-of-the-art anymore, or something that is just confusing, like an argumentless do. And these are removed from the product documentation. Functionality is full there. Nothing has changed, and all the language elements are supported as before. But we didn't want to encourage new customers to use syntax that is really awkward to use and not useful. That includes all our learning materials. So if you go to a class or InterSystems learning materials, you will not learn about all the other elements anymore. And we're planning to introduce new language elements to Caché Object Script in the future as well. There are other things that are in the product which are deprecated but still available, where I'll create a sunset date for it. So shadowing is something that is actually deprecated for quite some time. Initially, I was thinking of just removing shadowing, but still too many customers are using it, so we'll keep shadowing for a couple of more years around, and then it will definitely be gone from the product as well. But I didn't want to make that part being the showstopper for customers going forward. Now, eventually, I will publish this entire IRIS adoption guide, as I said earlier. And if you're looking for something that you're using and you want to find out is that technology removed or not, if it's not mentioned in the document, it's still there. That's the default. So I just mentioned shadowing already. Zen is one of these technologies that will be deprecated. So Zen Mojo is removed. Zen is still in the product. We will eliminate Zen as well. And here I need more feedback from customers of what would be a sensible time frame for us to do so. But it's time for all of us to move on to something else. LibID, for example, they're using other technologies. Other customers have started to use React, for example, or Angular to build their applications. And Zen is just something we all need to phase out and move forward with it. So some of the things that have been removed, here's some lists of it, the Globals API. So what we try to do when we say here what we removed, we tried also to give recommendation of what we think is most likely going to be the candidate of replacement if you use this. And there are a few things on here that are really important that all customers are moving away from, right? And Caché Direct, for example, or Visual M, right? This is really old technology, cannot be secured, right? There's nothing you can do about it. So we need to all try to find ways of moving on and find something else. These are just recommendations. This might not be the best solution for your particular case. So again, if you would like to get more feedback from InterSystems about this, please contact me. I'm very interested in engaging with you on your projects that you have on this. I would like to learn more of what your potential challenges is, what your strategy, what your timeline is, so that we can react appropriately and really be helpful with this. I want to make this document a living document and be able to change. Deep Sea 1 has been removed. I don't think that's any surprise. When we talked about Deep Sea, typically Deep Sea 2. The Deep Sea 1 is customers should move away from this. This is really old for quite some time. Deep Sea visual reporting is deprecated, and Zen reports as well. I'm sorry, Zen reports will continue. Sorry, I should not say that as well. So coexistence. There has been some misconception out there that you cannot install Caché and InterSystems IRIS on the same machine. That is definitely something we want to support. It's important for what I described earlier. Customers want to make a transition on the same box from an existing deployment that is maybe on Caché and Ensemble going into an InterSystems IRIS environment. You have to install this on the same machine, otherwise it will not work, right? Because you want to mount the databases that you already have there. So we need to do some more testing on all of those to make sure this message is accurate, but it's going to be you can run both on the same box. I have tried this already several times. I have not run into any issues yet, but I haven't tried mirroring yet, so we'll see what that one does. There is a concern about the ISC agent playing a role, so I need to still determine this. However, if there's anything related to isolation, virtual machines or containers are a great help for all of these kind of environments. So coexistence. So this again, it started out with the customer calling us and says, well, I have these thousands of instances, I just can't I want to use sharding. What can we do? And when you think about coexistence, the default starting point for all of this is there's no compatibility between this product line and this product line unless it is documented in this document here, right? So everything that is not mentioned here is not supported, most likely not going to work, or if you have configuration problems, is something. So again, these are just examples. So we looked at a certain set of technologies that we really would like to support. The core one that we need for this is ECP. So you can use ECP connections between Caché and Ensemble and InterSystems IRIS, which is your path to get actually to a sharding functionality in InterSystems IRIS. You just make an ECP connection there. I already mentioned the mirror configurations. Again, there will be sunsets for this, and the CSP gateway. And you see that there are version numbers associated with this. So you have to be on the Caché and Ensemble side at least at that version number or later to take advantage of coexistence. So we cannot support all the old versions anymore because otherwise the technology discrepancy is becoming too big, and then too much development work has to go into this. Similar things that we support is XDDBC. So what we envisioned is that you run this kind of coexistent environments. You have a mixed environment between Caché Ensemble and InterSystems IRIS, but your clients now using this kind of technology can connect to either one of those because we're keeping these connectivity components or access components compatible between product lines. One of them that is, for example, not on here is a common authentication mechanism. We support LDAP for this. So if you want to have a common mechanism for authentication and authorization across both product lines, use LDAP. Then you can work of one repository for both product lines on this technology. Client compatibility, InterSystems Atelier is since version 1.2 is supporting InterSystems IRIS. And it has already supported Caché and Ensemble since 2016.2. The current version is 1.3 for Atelier. It's out. Actually, I think we just released on 1.3 beta for Atelier. InterSystems Studio, so that's interesting here. InterSystems Studio that ships with Caché and Ensemble can only work with Caché and Ensemble. There will be a studio that will ship with InterSystems IRIS that can work with both, with Caché and Ensemble and InterSystems IRIS. So there's a different implementation coming for IRIS Studio. One of the reasons why we want to uncouple them is we want to put some more innovation into this area here, which we can't do because in the old product line that wouldn't work anymore, right? So we want to enhance it and make that possible. So migration guidance in general, well, you heard LibIT. We have other customers that have already done this with very good experience. A general process is, of course, starting out with an assessment of the situation. What do I have? What can I run here against in my environment? And ultimately, we are looking for trying to identify ways where we can give you maybe code or scripts that help identifying things that you want to pay attention to. The nature of the system is that you cannot cover this all because code can be very good, well hidden in executes, for example, right, or sit in a global that you execute. So it cannot cover all places, but often you get this 90 or 80% at least, and can start out with a lot of help. One thing that I haven't added to the presentation and which is more related to this rollout session here, and mostly because it isn't quite ready yet, is this earlier element that I said, so what actually happened at the time of going from one system to the next. And we're currently working on this to see how can this be done, first with a non-mirrored configuration. What are the steps that you have to go through to make this actually happen? Like, when do you shut instances down, right? When do you check the port numbers? Are you renaming the files? How do you get the security stuff over? How do you get the mapping, all this kind of things, elements over? Things that belong to the system core in itself. And once we have that defined and tested, we'll see how we can augment this now with scripts to make this automatic, so you don't have to go manually and say, I need to replace the InterSystems IRIS. You just say you want to do this. And then how do you create a scenario or avoid a scenario where you accidentally start a Caché instance that you shouldn't start anymore because InterSystems IRIS is already up and running. And so isolation is really important for this environment if you do a transition. So this is something that we're going to publish very soon for an InterSystems product itself by the end of this month. So customers will be able to take advantage of this for making a transition from an existing product to another product, which I cannot name because there's an announcement tomorrow and I can't talk about this. So, I managed to update this slide. So before I go into the final bye-bye speech, any questions? Yes?
You mentioned how Zen is being phased out, not
Yeah.
delivered with Iris. Is there a time frame? I know you were going to talk with customers, I think you mentioned. Is there kind of a guesstimate on when you think that'll be?
So my personal preference would be a date in the past. And I mean, I do not know, right? It's really hard. And on one hand, I like to, in general, I tend to like to pick dates that are very aggressive and then extend it if I have to. So right now, my answer would be 2 years.
For CSP underneath Zen, is that going to continue to be supported?
CSP is less of an issue. I don't think of CSP as something where I would put a priority in deprecating it. It's the Zen layer on top of it that has a complexity that isn't helpful in a lot of environments, and other technology is superior in moving this all forward in a faster reaction time going forward. But as I said earlier, I really would like to get more feedback from customers about this. What are your plans, if you have plans on this, and then see what the adjustment is. I haven't set a date, but if I could get my will, it would be yesterday. I go back to first, it was a millisecond before you, sorry.
Andreas, is there a change to the Caché license key? I need a different key?
Yes. So license models between Caché and Ensemble and InterSystems IRIS are different. They are not compatible between both product lines. The license features are also not compatible. There are new elements in the InterSystems IRIS license that will be very appealing to InterSystems IRIS customers, which is a new license type, which is called server. And server is a license type that pays attention to only the number of cores of a system. So for example, you buy a 4-core license, you have on a 4-core instance, that means you have unlimited users on it. You're not limited by users anymore. You're only limited by the overall response time of that machine, which is 4 cores, right? So if you bought it, specifically if you go into environments where the number of users is unknown or with high flexibilities, these will be of very high interest. Server is a real requirement if you want to go to the cloud, specifically if you want to take advantage of elasticity, right? You want to change the number of cores on a system because you want to get more throughput. That's not what you want if you have users, right? You don't want to change the number of users. You want just to add more power to it and then be able to utilize it. So there will be models coming out that will allow some dynamic in this area where you pay by usage, for example, right? So you buy a 4-core license, but maybe you only use 2 cores, and you pay for that specific use of how much of the resources that you have. So yes, it's very different. Very different in some possibilities. In general concept, it's not that very different, but there's different aspects, different terms and conditions, different rules.
You talked about database migration.
Yes.
From Caché to IRIS. Any specific concerns for an encrypted database?
The encryption mechanism between both systems is identical, no, there are no concerns, because when you do a transition through or conversion of data, all of this is happening on the memory layer, where the memory layer is always using unencrypted data anyway. So it's only when you write back to the disk that the encryption or decryption happens. So that should be totally transparent to the process of data conversion. Yes, again, he beat you by milliseconds.
Are the JDBC drivers that are backward compatible to Caché?
Yes.
They're already available?
Yes. Yes.
The change in licensing, is there a good migration path from the old world? So if I want to transition Ensemble or Caché over to IRIS, do I get any value from my original licensing?
Yes. Sales has a document that they can make available or discuss with you. That's also the better group to really talk about this kind of use case. But there is something in this document that talks about how do I migrate my existing license. So if you have an elite license here with certain kind of attributes, what would this translate into an InterSystems IRIS key for? So that will be helpful. But please talk with sales. They have much more ways of really addressing this correctly and find this to the specific needs.
But if you are in a current, say, user-based with Caché license model,
That still exists.
there is a migration path to it.
Yes, they still exist. User-based licenses have not gone away. They're still there.
We want to migrate from Caché to an IRIS server license.
If, again, this is technically it's possible. It's all a question of terms and conditions and price list elements, right? So this is something sales should answer. I'm staying away from this. It's possible, yes, and I don't think it's going to be a nightmare. That's probably the easiest part. Any other questions?
Yeah, going back to cloud scaling, so if we wanted to, in the licensing specifically, so if we wanted to spin up another VM to, say we meet the limits of our core, and the model that we have in place is to just spin up a new VM that would share that workload, how would the license scale with that? Would we name 2 licenses in essence?
Well, I mean, so from the traditional way, these would be 2 independent instances of each other. But often customers have a need of moving load between computers. I mean, VM is nothing else really than a computer. So you can get something coordinated through the license server that we have. So you install a license on the license server, which has an overall capacity available to it, and then you define on what instances participate in the sharing of that license capacity, and that can be dynamic. And so you just say, I want license capacity from this. For users, for cores, there's an amount of cores that you consume, which is determined at startup of an instance, so there's not much control over it. But if you do users, for example, you can say, I'm limiting this instance, for example, to only maximal take 400 users out of this capacity, and therefore control through these kind of environments a different kind of workload or scalability.
Is that core or user-based?
It's both work. These are 2 different license types. We still have user-based licenses, what we have today. Core is new and also can be done through license servers. Yes?
So in case if I'm using mirroring and I'm using a core allocation methodology, is there any kind of automatic reallocation of cores if it fails over? So like on my backup memory, I don't necessarily...
No, the instance, an instance, when it starts up, it just looks, from the licensing point of view, just looks at, do I have enough cores licensed for the instance for the computer that I'm seeing here? So the virtual machine, you might see less cores than the hardware underneath is. The license has to be in sync with what the instance sees. After this, there is no further considerations for cores. We're not doing something like we only use 2 cores of an instance, right? It will use all cores. So if you have 2 instances on it, they will both use all cores. If you want to have isolation for this, you can use containers, for example. You install 2 containers, which is really easy to do and very simple to do. And as you start up the container, you say you use cores 1 and 2, and you use core 3 and 4. And that way you can get a separation over 2 instances and not stepping on each other of using cores. Seems no further question, and I thank you very much for participating in this session and wish you a great conference.